All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you!
This is my boomstick.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Good evening and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts.
I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa, and we are back after a much-deserved hiatus. We both needed some time. I have just come off of like a week and a half of going to bed super late, watching either the Heat or the Panthers.
It's been a busy time there in sports for you in Florida.
It's insane. Yeah,
and the Fish are coming on too.
They are. We're in contention for the wild card, baby. First time in a while. So
impressive.
Yeah. I'm very excited. So that's exciting. And Messi.
Yeah. Inter Miami, absolutely.
Yeah. So it is an exciting time to be a sports fan in South Florida. But this is not Shiver, a sports podcast. This is Shiver, a slasher movie podcast, because we are here to talk about a slasher movie that I love. And in our overview section, we're going to get into The Prowler, the 1981 slasher. So before we get started, I want to give a shout out to my friend and yours, Andy Chacon. He suggested, hey, why don't you guys do a summer slasher series? And I said, hey, that's what the fuck we're doing.
Hell
because that sounds fantastic. So Daniel and I each picked two slashers, right? We'll alternate. I went first, and my choice was The Prowler. Now, Daniel, you had not seen this one yet, right?
I had started this one time, and it was one that I don't know if I had a couple drinks and fell asleep, or if I just fell asleep or what. But I had really only seen probably about the first 25 minutes of it. I realized when I started watching it, it was not long before it reached the point where it was new to me. So essentially, it was my first watch.
Okay, cool. So, what were your thoughts in watching this for the first time officially?
So I wasn't sure kind of what to expect from this movie, because this is honestly one that before you ever mentioned this movie, this was one that was never even on my radar. This was not a movie I'd heard people talk about. So I didn't know if it was going to be one of those things where it's maybe it's not that great, but the people who love it, love it. And so I didn't know what to expect. So that being said, I was happy with it. I saw back when I did The Town That Dreaded Sundown with Nakia Day, we spent a lot of time mentioning all the things that made that a proto slasher. And this was another one like that, where it was fun to go back and see a movie that laid the groundwork for things that we just consider slasher movie tropes now. It is not a movie that is without faults, but I did really like it. There was some great kills in this movie. There's a good twist. I love that you don't really know who the killer is for most of the movie, so you get that mystery angle. The acting was, it was what it was.
Acting.
Yeah, it got us where we needed to be. But I mean, in total, I really liked this. There were a lot of things about the way this movie was shot and the pacing in this movie that I thought were really, really good, especially for one that came out in 81, when this was a subgenre that was still in its infancy. Yeah. This was still a time when everybody was trying to figure out how you make one of these movies. And there's a lot to take away from this. It's really good. I ended up enjoying the crap out of it. And there's going to be quite a couple of sections in here where there's some really memorable stuff that we're going to get to talk about. So I liked it a lot.
I am so glad to hear that. Because as much as I talk about this movie, and I feel like I mentioned this movie on the show maybe once every 2 or 3 months.
Right.
I really, really love this movie. I don't know how it came on my radar. I know that this is not one of the ones that I discovered in high school, going to Blockbuster all the time.
Right.
This was something that I discovered in adulthood. And I don't know if it was on a list of like best slashers. I do know that a couple of years ago, I started just furiously watching as many slashers as I could. I go through this. I get manic and I'm like, okay, zombie movies, let's watch them all. And then I'll just go through like a 4-month period where the only thing I'll watch is fucking zombie movies.
Nice.
And so good, bad, somewhere in the middle, I'll just sit down and watch them all. This was on that list, I guess, of movies when, I don't know, maybe 7-8 years ago, I was like, I'm just going to watch a bunch of slashers.
Right.
And I've watched it, I want to say, once, maybe twice a year for the last 7 or 8 years.
Wow. Okay.
Really, really resonated with me. And I'm sure that my bias has something to do with it. Because there's 2 names on those opening credits that did something for me. 2 names I was familiar with when I saw the movie, although I didn't know it when I first put the movie on.
Right.
And 2 names that just about any horror fan is going to recognize. The first name is Joseph Zito. And Zito very famously directed what many consider to be the best Friday the 13th movie, which is part 4, the final chapter.
Final chapter. Mm-hmm.
On any given day, you ask me, and I waffle between 2 of, which one is my favorite. I'll say 60 to 70% chance I'm going to tell you it's part 6.
Okay.
But that other 40%, it's going to be part 4. And if I was thinking of a Friday the 13th movie to introduce someone to, it would be part 4.
Yes. Yeah.
To me, that is the quintessential Friday the 13th movie. And that's Joseph Zito right there. He is, in my mind, he is 80s horror and he is 80s action, because he also directed 2 ridiculously awesome 80s action movies in Invasion USA and Missing in Action. Both with Chuck Norris. So this guy really knows how to shoot stuff to make it interesting. The other name that's attached to this is the maestro himself, Tom Savini.
Yeah.
And if you don't know who Tom Savini is, you're in your
listening
horror
to the wrong
infancy.
Podcast. Yeah.
Well, actually, I would argue you're listening to the right podcast.
Good call.
Because everyone's got to learn somewhere. So if you've never heard the name Tom Savini before, you're probably in your horror infancy. And that's okay. That's a beautiful place to be, because there's a huge discovery that's coming your way. But you got to fucking learn who the hell Tom Savini is, because he is literally the greatest special effects artist of all time. Correct. And when you listen to people talk about this movie, they will say either they loved it, they will say that they were somewhat indifferent about it, or they will say, I hated the story. But they will always say, Tom Savini, wow. Yeah. This is what Tom Savini himself says is his best work. And it's hard to argue with that. It really is spectacular what he was able to do in this movie. I mentioned with Ralph Diaz-Wagner a couple weeks ago when we did Tenebrae that some of these movies, and I think I mentioned this one in particular, you're watching it and you're like, that's a snuff film.
Yeah.
This person died.
Yes.
That guy, he killed himself, or someone killed him for the betterment of this movie.
That shines in this movie. Like there are a couple when we get to kills where I'm like, I'm still not 100% convinced they didn't actually kill someone.
Yes. So for me, this is a movie I continue to go back to. I absolutely love this movie, all aspects of it, not just special effects. We'll get to why in a little bit.
So let's get into the movie a little bit, because this is this seems to be something that this is going to be an area that's going to be divisive about people when it comes to this movie, and that's the story that we're looking at here. What's interesting to me is the fact that this was released in '81, the same year as My Bloody Valentine, and there are a lot of parallels to draw between the stories here. So you've got this group that in 1945 they're having this big graduation dance, and there's a murder. So then the dance goes away. Comes back in 80, and then you're worried about whether or not the killer's going to come back because the dance is back. That's My Bloody Valentine, right? Like, yeah. So when we talk about slashers, we always talk about the idea of, is there a good story here, or is there just enough to get me from kill to kill, from A to B to C? So what's your takeaway from the story on this one?
I think that the story here is actually pretty interesting. And I think that that's part of the reason why this movie works. I think that there's definitely bits where it's like, wait, they didn't wrap that up. Or why did they include that in here?
Right.
But I think a lot of that is, it might be that there wasn't an awful lot of care taken in the actual writing of the story.
Right.
It could be that some things were filmed just to pad out runtime. And it could be that some things were there simply to excite you.
Yeah.
None of those things are necessarily inherently bad. And I don't think that they're bad in this movie. I can really only think of one instance where I was like, but why? And that's when after the dance has gone on lockdown, the guy in the tweed jacket and the girl who's concerned go down into the basement to make whoopee, as they would have said. Right. Nothing really comes of that. And we don't even really get a sex scene either. So I'm not sure. No, I'm not sure what the purpose of that was, except to maybe show us what's going on in the dance hall.
Yeah, like I seriously rewound to see if maybe I had dozed off, because I was like, why did we follow these people down to the basement? And I don't remember seeing them get killed or see like anything come of this. So it was like, I rewound to see, I was like, maybe I dozed off for a minute, but just nothing comes of it. They
live. That's it. You know, and the same thing happens to Shelley in part 3 of Friday the 13th. He goes out from the bar. We never see him again.
Right.
What the fuck happens to him? I don't know. You don't know. No one fucking knows. I doubt the writer of this movie knows. And honestly, I can overlook it. It's the only instance in the story where I'm like, but why? Why was that in there? I do understand, as someone who was once a horny young man, that it doesn't matter what's going on outside.
Correct.
Sometimes you just want to fuck.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, that's like the very first like horror movie trope that this presents to us. It's like guy who prioritizes sex over safety. Oh, the lights are out while we're in this gazebo. That's okay. We're gonna be all right. It's like
all the better for no one to see us, darling. You know. So it's but I do think that the actual story here, right? You know, because you can nitpick and be like, yeah, what's that thing there? But it's one thing, man. If you're gonna let one issue stand in the way of everything else, I mean, you shouldn't be a movie fan at all. Don't watch movies. You know, it happens all the time. So I don't let that one thing get in the way. And I look at the actual story here, the actual mystery here, and I think that's part of why this movie works so well for me, is because it is a really good mystery. The first time I watched this, I had no idea who the killer was, because they drop a whole bunch of hints, and they're good enough about letting you know that the sheriff always goes away.
Right.
For his fishing trip.
Of course this is my fishing trip.
Yeah. You know, now, is it suspicious that he's going away at the same time that there's, you know, some sort of killer on the loose? Yeah. But he seems like a small town sheriff who doesn't really worry about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, the worst he worries about is keeping these college kids, these co-eds, like in line.
Yeah.
And if they seem to respond to the deputy, you got nothing really to worry about. So it's not really the kind of thing that you're going to dwell on. Like we're not 40 minutes into this runtime and you're like, I remember that sheriff went on that fishing trip. It's not until he makes that phone call to the fishing lodge, wherever the sheriff was staying, that you even remember the sheriff existed.
Yeah, exactly. Because it just seems like a plot device that ropes the deputy into having to deal with this on his own because he's trying to prove himself. So it seems like that is the plot device that the sheriff going on the fishing trip serves.
Yeah. Well, then the other thing is that to me, these are young people, because they're not kids,
right?
But they're young people behaving in an appropriate manner.
Yeah,
because these are drunk college kids.
Yep.
They're not high school kids. They're not middle school kids, and they look their age.
Yes,
that is something that I don't care how many times I've seen certain movies. I'm like, I don't buy this person as Beverly Hills 90210 is the perfect example. Not one of those people look like they were in high school. And by the time you get to season like fucking 6, and it's like, okay, you've been on your junior year for like 3 seasons now.
Yeah,
and you must be hitting those cigarettes hard because the fucking lines showing up on your face, man. Wow. Like these people look like they're about to graduate college.
Yeah.
They look like real people, and for the most part, they behave like real people too. I don't think that anyone here behaves in a manner inconsistent with their character. No one is unnecessarily stupid. No one is unnecessarily flirty.
Right. And I mean, yeah, like even the guys making moves, it's never that over the top, like ridiculous amount of aggression in it. It's right. That position that we've all been in before when you're out on a date and trying to get laid. And it's like, let's just check it out. Let's just see what's in the basement. Like that type of thing. Yeah. Like it's all very casual and seems realistic.
Very, very realistic for me. And I think that that's part of what makes this movie work so well, is that there is a layer of realism here that I can imagine that someone would come back from war with PTSD, or fuck the PTSD, they're just fucking nuts.
Yeah. Also,
and
I've known plenty of soldiers, and plenty of them that also just became soldiers because their grasp on reality was tentative at best.
Right. And truthfully, I mean, the majority of soldiers that come back from war work through their trauma,
right?
And never once stab anyone with a pitchfork, So it really just boils down to a guy who happened to have fatigues and could make a really cool costume,
really good, just great,
and got away with it the first time.
Yeah,
and I love that it was just like he got away and he learned to live with his trauma until he was reminded of it again. And to me, that's such a classic slasher trope. And the last movie we talked about on the show, Tenebrae, is a giallo. And that's such a classic giallo thing. To me, this feels like the maybe the best version of what an American giallo actually would have been.
Yeah.
Because there's a good mystery here. There's great kills. And in the end, it really never mattered, because whether the story was good or not, that's not why you're watching this. You're watching this to see some fantastic fucking kills, and that they are.
Yeah. I mean, what's great about the story in this movie to me is the way that, like you mentioned, they leave the clues, and it's left in such a way that you can kind of start to piece it together for yourself. But I also love that they never do the unnecessary exposition of having two characters discussing what the clues that they've found are.
Right.
You're just kind of allowed to see the pieces come together and build them at the same rate as the characters in the movie. And if you never do, well, then that's on you. If it gets to the point where the mask is ripped off and you see it's the sheriff and you're completely floored and none of this has made any sense, well, that's your fault.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't need to have a scene where two characters stood around and discussed everything that went into this. You were allowed to put it together and for yourself. And I loved it. I loved the way that it was never ridiculous, kind of the way that they found clues. It never quite crossed into that like Scooby-Doo territory of it just being overtly big that something's there. Is it kind of weird that suddenly she can see the necklace hanging out of the fireplace? Sure. But does it pay off? Hell yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like you get something great out of that. One of my favorite story elements for this movie is the way it opens with the newsreel and then the Dear John letter. Mm-hmm. And you're immediately put into this place where you don't know who the killer is, but you automatically know all of the things that have gone on in this dude's life that are putting him in this position. You know that this is the guy coming back from the war. You know this is the guy whose girl left him because he was gone in the war. And you're immediately told all of that. So now, great. Once a killer shows up, I know why he's doing this. He's pissed. Yeah, he's shell-shocked, PTSD. All of that stuff makes sense. And then that's it. Like, that's all the exposition we ever need. And then you eventually get to kind of piece together who it is and how all these people are connected. I did really like that. This was a movie where the story that's between the lines, the story that I was allowed to write for myself as I watched it, became captivating. Mm-hmm. And that's something really cool. I enjoyed that I got to fill that in, that I got to put these pieces together, and that it was paced in such a way where whenever there's a big reveal, something that with a big reveal that's paced well, you're going to realize about 35 seconds before the reveal. That's how I always gauge like a reveal versus a twist. You know, like if it's a twist and it kind of comes out of nowhere and you're shocked. A reveal is when you've got all the pieces there and then right before it happens, you figure it out. And I love when something is paced that way, where I didn't figure it out too early. I wasn't completely floored when the mask came off. I had just finished putting everything together and understanding why it all happens. And then the mask comes off. And I was like, that was great.
And that's why, in my opinion, a reveal, and I love the way you put that, because it really isn't a twist.
Right.
The reveal is always much more satisfying than the twist.
Yes. 100%. And this is a movie that led up to the reveal very skillfully. So outside of that, the story of the dance coming back. So, you know, the guy is now reliving trauma and all of that. That stuff's all fine. I do appreciate that this movie stuck to what is now just kind of the metric of a slasher at 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And I love a good one night in a small town movie. Like there's a good feel to that, where you're almost feels like you're living this out in real time with the characters in the movie. Mm-hmm. And that's something that this movie did very well. It wasn't okay, now we're all living in terror and we don't know what's going to happen next. No, you just had this one terrible tension-filled night where some of the people still never really knew what was going on, you know?
Yeah, and that's true.
Yeah, exactly. Like there were plenty of kids at that dance who were just like, oh, there's, you know, they just keep saying there's a prowler out. I mean, that could just be some dude trying to catch a glimpse of you in your panties while you're changing, you know?
Right.
Like the word prowler, there's a breadth there for what the word prowler can encompass. And it didn't slow them down. The band kept on. You know, just out there doing their early 80s, you know, kind of punky rock thing.
I fucking love that band.
Dude, I thought they were great.
Yeah, they were really good.
I had the subtitles on. And so I was like, okay, yeah, these are great early 80s, like punk lyrics. Like these are just some dudes that want to get drunk and party. I'm down. Like I enjoyed the band.
Yeah. I wonder if like Joseph Zito like just walked into a bar one day to grab a beer and he heard these guys and he was like, that's it. I found the band.
Got a proposal for you. I've got a question for you. Do you watch with subtitles on?
I do.
When you were watching, did your subtitles have 4s instead of apostrophes?
Yes, I don't know why, but the subtitles for this movie are terrible. They're all over the
They're
place.
ridiculous.
Yeah, I know that subtitles are done by the distribution studio. So, some are really good about it, some are not. I can't remember, is it Blue Underground that did this release that I have? I don't remember. But it's
Sandhurst releasing is who's listed on the wiki.
Okay.
But I don't know that was this like production of it, this version of it.
Right. Yeah. I think it might have been, I think the name was Blue Underground.
Okay.
Is the name of it kind of like how Arrow video does a bunch of these. Man, Ralph and I went off and off on this stuff. Kino Lorber, a couple of these. So anyway, this is what Shout Factory. That's the other big one.
There we go.
That'll do it. And it wasn't Shout Factory. It wasn't Arrow. Those guys put a lot of effort into their releases. This is very bare bones.
Yeah, no. And so it was just probably about 20, 30 minutes into it, I stopped noticing. Like it just became one of those things where I saw it and it didn't really register. But for the first 20 minutes of this movie, there's just fours just constantly in my subtitles.
It reminds me of when the llamas have taken over the credits in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. and it's all like Nordic lettering.
Yes.
Like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah, it's very, very similar. But I like I said, all things considered, the story that we have here is more than bare bones because it's better than some of the Texas Chainsaw Massacres we've gotten, that don't really tell a story. They just guide you from kill to kill. There's definitely something here that's worth noticing and paying attention to, and that kept my interest, and that was pretty cool. And like I said, I had just pieced it all together and who I was willing to put my chips on as being the killer before he, rips off the mask and you put it all together. And that made it feel fulfilling to me. That made it feel like it was all worthwhile.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of taking off the mask and seeing the fulfillment, there's a lot of characters in this movie, a lot of characters, and that is hard to juggle. Slashers are notoriously bad at this. And I'm talking about my favorite subgenre of horror here. All right. There's so many characters, usually because you need people to kill.
Right.
So these characters tend to be one-dimensional. They tend to be maybe interesting a little bit, right? But there's a lot of them. How do you feel about the characters in this one? In general, but then also, is there one or two that you'd like to point out?
So, in general, I think that what we got here, like we mentioned, was a realistic portrait of just kind of a cross section of what a small college would be like in a small town like this. I think that we weren't quite in that one-dimensional space for some people. I think a lot of them were. I think a lot of them were just there to kind of be bodies. You got the guy in the tweed jacket who's just trying to get laid in the basement. You've got the one guy who's drinking before the dance even starts. He's puking before it's over. Those guys. You've got the lady of ill repute, if you will, who's who's just down to get with anybody,
flashing the old man from across the street.
Exactly, just handling her business. But I think that when you get into kind of the main people, when you're looking at the deputy, and when you're looking at Vicky Dawson's character, whose name I have suddenly forgotten, Pam, and so when you start to look at them, they don't develop them out into giving us their histories and stuff like that. But they do have conversations and interactions with people that make them personable and feel more real, which is always something that's going to make a slasher better. If you're watching a slasher and you see a person as something other than cannon fodder, then you're going to get a more guttural reaction when something happens to them, or just when they're in some sort of imminent danger. In the case of Pam, she ends up surviving.
Root for them.
What?
And root for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And Pam ends up surviving, but she's in a lot of situations that she has a couple really close calls, and then she's just full blown fight with the killer at the end. So I think that we got just enough development from characters that we needed it from, and we didn't get any unnecessary development from characters who ultimately didn't matter. That it was okay if they were just cannon fodder. The roommate in the shower. Sure, we don't really need to know that much about her, right? There was one character in particular, and not even like a character from the movie. This is like just like from a film perspective. The guy who runs the shop, I think his name was Kingsley.
Yeah.
I went and looked. I was willing to bet lots of money that was a young version of Sid Haig.
Yes, he looks just like him.
It was, and he doesn't just look like him. He sounds just like him.
Yeah.
When he's running that shop and he's getting on to the guy about looking at the magazine and hanging out too long and watching, I was like, that's Captain Spaulding. Yeah. I paused the movie because I was like, maybe it just somehow missed his IMDb. Like, I'm just desperately it was not Sid Haig, and you could have knocked me over with a feather when I found out it was not Sid Haig, because I was willing to bet money that it was him. It was so crazy how much Sid Haig I saw in him. So not that he was a standout character, just I really thought it was Sid Haig.
Yeah.
As far as, characters who stand out, I did really enjoy Mark London, the deputy. There was a good development arc there in him. When we first meet him, he's kind of ogling the girls hanging the banner and then trying to play it off because the girl he likes walks up and she gives him shit about it immediately. Spectacular. The way I don't want you to strain your eyes twice in one day. Just fantastic line.
Yeah.
But we end up seeing him go from this guy who you think maybe has an eye for everybody in town and might be kind of crappy at his job because of the way the sheriff talks to him at the beginning, to somebody who we eventually learn really does genuinely seem to care about Pam and this town and takes his job very seriously, which isn't who he's presented to us at first. And so the actor who played him, Chris Goutman, he did a really good job of showing that growth. And like I said, this movie spans a day, and he gave us a really good character development arc out of him in just that one span, because as soon as the killer shows up and Pam comes out and she's like, somebody was chasing me in there, like, you see him go into work mode.
Yeah.
And suddenly he's really serious. And it's like, oh shit, like, this guy takes being a cop seriously. You never got that feeling before that moment. And you see that switch flip. And he ends up, being really good at taking care of her and putting this puzzle together. And so it was just really interesting because, like I said, when we first see him, it's just like, oh man, it's just some dude who became a cop to try to get laid. Yeah. And then you see that he's actually really good at his job. And so that was a fun progression. I did enjoy him a lot.
There's a great character moment with him where he and Pam are in the middle of an argument at Major Chatham's house. And she says, well, why don't you go call the sheriff? And it's said in a way where it's like, well, if you can't get the job done, call in the adult.
Right.
And he looks hurt.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that there's spectacular acting in this movie, but there's occasionally really good acting in this movie. And I think that there was really good acting there, particularly between Goutman and Dawson. There was chemistry there. And there was something there. I would not be surprised to hear that they had like an offset fling.
Right.
And you're right, man. He's spectacular.
Yeah. I was really impressed with him. And then, like you said, the acting isn't great from once you get away from those two characters, but they all presented exactly who we needed them to be.
Yeah.
You know, now when a slasher gets released, you look for these types of characters. You know, it's like, okay, who's the loose one? You know, who's the nerdy one? Who's the white knight? Like, you look for those characters. But in 81, they weren't tropes. You know, it's like how on when the show The Real World first started, they were really just casting people. Then, 4 or 5 seasons in, they were casting roles. Yeah. And that's now we're seeing the origins of that, where it's like, we're just creating characters, and then we eventually find out that this group dynamic works. So you look back at this being in 81 and you go, okay, so this is the seeds of learning what makes this group dynamic to where you can reach a point where you make a movie like Cabin in the Woods, and you purposefully reference how each of these people is, the jester and the gladiator, the
jock, and
you reach that point. And so it's always fun. Every time we do one of these old ones, I always love to go back and see that you can go back and you can see where these tropes originated. And it's like, this is one of the original formulas on what makes that slasher click work. And that's a really cool and fun concept to get to see. Like I said, the girl who ends up getting killed in the pool, who's just dancing with everybody and drinking, and she's there with the one guy, and she's dancing with the cop, and she's flirting with the banner. She did exactly what she needed to do, like no more, no less. I can't fault her for that. She gave me the exact character that she needed to be. And we
knew who she was from the very beginning. We knew that the only thing she was interested in was having a good time.
Right.
It was her last night really as a college student, and all she wanted was to enjoy herself.
Yeah. So I think that what we got out of this movie was a couple of, like you said, really good acting moments, and then just a lot of, here's what you need for this movie to work.
That scene where she dies in the swimming pool, if that is not inspiration for what I think is the best death in The Strangers Pray at Night, I don't know what is. And as that movie is less of a 70s thriller and more of an 80s slasher, to me, when I saw The Strangers Pray at Night, I was like, that's it. That's the Prowler reference right there.
Yep.
And Bertino as a horror, maestro would know that, all right, I got to reference some of these classics here. There's 2 characters that I want to talk about. One has a smaller role, and one has a well, no, it's still a small role. They're both small roles. I don't want to go on and on about some of the characters you spoke about, because you chose the best guys. One is the MC from the graduation party in 1945.
Yeah,
that guy can control a party, man. He really is a master of ceremonies, and he's throwing out references to Glenn Miller, and I'm like, yeah, man, like he was exactly the kind of MC that my grandfather told me stories about.
Right.
Like to me, that was authentic to the 40s. And I wasn't around at the 40s. Not even by a long shot, I think I should have been born in that time.
Right.
I love the movies. I love the fashion. I love the music. I love, all of it except for, the societal issues, but, which is huge.
The war.
Yeah. You're probably going to end up, dead somewhere in Normandy, but it's fine. He was so good, and he sold it, and I love his costume. He wore the Seinfeld puffy shirt,
yes,
as his tuxedo shirt, and man, he fucking killed it. He was owning that fucking tux.
Yes,
it was spectacular. It was great, and it's such a great contrast to the fact that there is no MC in the party in the 80s. There's just a band.
Yeah.
And then when the teacher gets up, what was her name? I can't remember the teacher's name now. Miss Allison. When she gets up onto the stage, it's like, okay, well, she has to do that because there is no MC. Which, by the way, Miss Allison is a stone cold fox.
No lies detected. Yeah.
Yeah. I would not have been able to focus if she was my professor.
Correct.
What the fuck? Anyway, she was also fantastic. Miss Allison, to me, really had and it wasn't just her, but it was the way that people acted around her. You got the impression that the students respected her but enjoyed being her student.
Right.
She's there at the party, she's helping set the thing up, and yet they're hiding the alcohol from her.
Right.
You know, so like there's this balance of like reference to one of my favorite movies of all time, Mean Girls. You know, I'm not a regular mom, I'm a cool mom.
I'm a cool
you
mom.
know, but you're still a mom. You know, you still have to be an authority figure, you know, and I realized how he said that. I don't mean that as a bad thing, you know, you're a mom, you know. I'm married to a mom. In a lot of ways, I am a mom. So it was great the way that she was able to be authoritarian, but also be fun lover at the same time. I thought that was fantastic. And wow, what a fucking death.
Yeah, I mean, and also like even the drunk guy who's like trying to get out to go, meet up with his girlfriend. She was a waif. I mean, he could have, and that dude was taller than everyone else at the party.
Yeah.
I mean, he could have just shoved her to the side and went out, but he didn't take that route. You know, he, like you said, there was obviously an amount of respect there to where even in this drunken stupor that he was in, and all he was thinking about was going to meet his girl at the pool.
Yeah.
He still even halted at her authority at the door.
Yeah.
And so there is a healthy amount of respect there for that teacher.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And some of that could be it's a societal thing. A cultural thing. Teachers definitely don't have the respect that they used to.
No. Believe it or not.
Yeah, right. Said one teacher to the other. But there's always been people that you don't respect.
Right.
And some of them happen to be teachers and professors. And I think she does a really good job of capturing that.
Yeah. And again, like I said, just so many of the people here just kind of serve, like you said, you've got to have a lot of characters in these movies because you got to have people to kill. And so, moving forward, it's time that we get into that section that we always, that we've got to do. And that is somebody's got to do the killing.
Yeah.
You've got to have somebody who's gonna pile up these bodies. So what we get in the Prowler is a masked man that we are slowly able to kind of piece together who he is. We know from the beginning that it's got something to do with the Dear John letter and the war. And we start to get those pieces and we end up with just, the Prowler as our killer. So when you look at the Prowler, the sheriff, as we eventually find out that he is, I mean, how does this guy stack up for you?
I think of him as one of my iconic slasher killers. I mean, everyone's always going to talk about the big three,
right?
Your Freddy, your Jason, and your Michael. You can probably extend that to Chucky and to Ghostface, Leatherface. But that's about it as far as like what everyone recognizes as like the iconic slashers.
Right.
The thing is, there's like hundreds and hundreds of slasher movies.
Yeah.
And hundreds of slashers. On a different level, I feel like the Miner from My Bloody Valentine and the Prowler from the Prowler are just as iconic. For the horror aficionado,
right?
These guys are like they're equal. to your Freddys and your Jasons and your Michaels. There's just less content. And I think it goes back to the fact that in the early 80s, they weren't thinking about building a franchise. They were thinking about, we want to deliver a good movie with good kills that's going to keep someone coming back watching week after week. Because remember, the video craze was just getting started. So you were either renting this movie week after week, or if it was in its initial run in the theaters, you were watching it until it got out of theaters. So you needed a compelling killer, someone who was going to bring someone back to this movie, because you weren't thinking, well, where's the part 2 next year?
Right.
You know, like that didn't really start until Friday the 13th. You know, because even Halloween comes out in 1978. We don't get another one until 81.
Yeah.
You know, right around the time that Friday the 13th part 2 is coming out. So, to me, this is such an iconic slasher, and he's so inventive with his kills because they're not inventive.
Yeah.
They're just a way to kill you.
Yes.
And what I really, really, really love about this guy is we see him kill one person in 1945, and then we see him kill like 5 people in 1980. But he says that every year he goes on a fishing trip.
Right.
Does he use that fishing trip as a way to go out and kill people? Like he's a crazy person. He's a psycho, right? Psychos need to release that somehow. Is he using his fishing trips, his annual fishing trip, to go out in other places, rural places, and just fucking murder people?
Yeah.
To me, that's one of the things about this character that I absolutely love. Because if I were a horror filmmaker who didn't have an original idea, I'm not a horror filmmaker and I don't have an original idea. So I'm only halfway there, you know? There's 35 years?
Yeah.
Of George, what was his name? Not
George Fraser.
Fraser, thank you. Going around possibly killing people. And you can make 35 fucking movies.
Oh, yeah.
Right there. You know, you've got, you know, every movie starts the same way. You know, he's Deputy Fraser in the first one, you know, and he's just getting out and he's like, all right, well, I'm going for a fishing trip. I'll see y'all in a week when I get back. And then it's just him going to fucking town, murdering people. I would love to see that movie.
Okay.
Because I love this killer so much. And when it comes to slasher killers, it's all about the look and it's all about the aggression. And that's why the version of Michael Myers that we get in the Rob Zombie film is incredible.
Yes.
And I know that it's not the Michael Myers, but holy fuck, I've never seen Michael be that aggressive before.
It is something.
It is something. And that's what brings you back to that movie. And there's an aggression here. The way that he stabs through the skull, you know, that's the image that we have back here. If you're watching live right behind us. Wow. I mean, there is anger there. Like that is catharsis for him.
Yes.
There's a lot of psychology behind this guy that isn't really there. You know, we're just looking at a performance. We're looking at the way it's written, and, you know, we're applying our own real world science to this guy. But to me, that's part of what makes him so good, is that he seems real. You know, because when I'm angry, I listen to really loud heavy metal. If there's no one in the house, I'll play really loud heavy metal, you know, plug my guitar into my amplifier and I bang things out, you know? But I specifically stay away from going to the shooting range. I specifically stay away from going to the batting cages. I stay away from going to the driving range, because if I get anything that could be used as a weapon in my hand, not good.
Right.
That's a very real human thing. You know, you're going to take your aggression out. And if your instinct is, I'm going to grab my bayonet and I'm going to stab it through some guy's skull, guess what the fuck you're going to do?
Yeah.
So I absolutely love this killer. What do you think?
So just from the top, the look, man, the look of this killer is so great because it's not anything absurd. It's just it's like the Michael Myers jumpsuit. It's something you could just see anybody in. And so but he's got the full face covering. So one, the look of it is just incredible.
Yeah.
Two, I love that, yes, he does stab a bayonet all the way through a guy's skull, but he's never presented as being absurdly strong or anything superhuman. In the very first kill, the one that's in 45, when he stabs through that couple with the pitchfork, it's not an effortless thing where he just kind of cleanly goes in. No, he like hits, pushes, and then puts his
steps
boot
on it
on the pitchfork to push it through. So we're immediately presented with, okay, this is just a guy with issues. And so I love my supernatural killers too. Like you said, I love Jason, I love Freddy, but it's always a nice twist when you've got just a dude with problems. When we did Scream, we talked about how there are all those moments where Ghostface like trips over furniture. And stuff like that
real
happens.
Moments.
Real moments. And that's the type of thing. If you're trying to stab through two people with a pitchfork, you're gonna have to put your boot on that fucker and you're gonna have to push hard. That's the only way it's going all the way through. And so then as his kills progress, there's a level of realism to them in the fact that we're aware that this guy was a soldier. And so, he would probably be adept at slashing someone's neck or know how to use a bayonet well enough that it wouldn't be a crazy thing for him to come straight down through someone's skull and be able to get through that. We also know that he's probably taken very good care of his gear because he's highly trained in it. We would, you're led to assume by knowing he's a soldier. So I ended up really, really liking this guy. And that first kill, I was like, a pitchfork? I wasn't sure. I thought it seemed kind of hokey at first when I just saw that he was going to get people with a pitchfork. But then that everything else, the first, when you see him gearing up and you know that this guy's got a sawed off and he's got a bayonet and a dagger and a pitchfork and you're going, okay, so now this is a well-prepared dude. And so you start to understand that there, like you said, there's a level of psychosis there that's an interesting dissection because he's not just somebody who snapped and grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed somebody. This is a well-laid plan. From the very first one, all he does in that first one, he stabs through the two of them with a pitchfork, but we see all the stuff he's got. And he uses the knife to cut the lights, and he creates an atmosphere in which he can get away with this. And so you start to see all of those things where you can't just write this guy off as a psycho with a bayonet. You have to look at this guy as somebody who's highly dangerous because he's skilled and well prepared, which is something that you don't always see. Your Michael Myers, your Jason's, hell, to an extent, your Chuckies. These are people who just work well in any environment because they have no motivation other than the kill. So nothing's going to stop them from getting it. This is a guy who, because if he gets stabbed, it's going to affect him. He has to be well planned. One of the things when we finally get the reveal, it's because he's gasping for breath.
Yeah.
Because he's been shot. Because he's been shot and he has a pitchfork in his back.
Yeah.
And so he's desperately just trying to breathe. So he removes the mask because that's your natural instinct. If you're having a hard time breathing, you don't want anything covering your face. And so all of these things lead to somebody that you can draw lines to it making sense that this guy, one, is well trained and has probably done this a lot, but two, man, he's just a human being. He's a human being with a lot of problems, but he's just a human, and that's
anything but therapy, man.
Anything but therapy. if Twitter has taught us nothing, man. So there's a lot to like about this guy. It was really interesting because from just looking at like the cover art, I was like, this is kind of a goofy getup. But I mean, like I said, shit, Michael Myers is a mechanic's jumpsuit and a William Shatner mask. You know, we get past these things when we're giving killers that we care about and present us with situations that we want to watch. And that's what we got here. I couldn't agree more with all of that. And in talking about this, like for me, I really love the idea that this guy learned how to be a killing machine in war and never let those tools dull. Right. The possibility that he does every year go out on a fishing trip where he fishes for people. Right. And I man, this idea is driving me crazy. I think you and I need to write this movie and sell it to like Jordan Peele or something. There we go.
I would love to see Jordan Peele take a stab at this. And speaking of taking a stab, there's really only one thing left to talk about before we get to ratings. And making a comeback. We haven't had this segment in quite a while, but we also haven't done a slasher in a minute. All right. We're talking blood and boobs. All right. There's two things that every slasher must have in the 80s to be a slasher. One is blood, the other's boobs. Right. Violence and sex and violence. It sells. Right. It's what kept people watching Game of Thrones. It's what kept people watching slashers all throughout the 80s.
Always.
So the violence, the kills, and the sexuality, gratuitous or just right? What do you think?
Both. I think that the violence in this is ridiculously gratuitous, but it sells and it works in the movie. This movie is never presented as fantastical. This movie's never presented as supernatural. And so, you know, the violence that we get is gratuitous, but slitting someone's throat is a gratuitous action. You know, when he gets the girl in the pool, like we said, there were two kills in this movie where I'm not convinced that they didn't actually kill someone. And the girl in the pool is one of them. This is Tom Savini at his Saviniest. When you are watching the two of them in the pool and you see the blade buried in her neck when it is still very obviously the actress. And that thing is a half-inch deep in her neck, if not more, and moving. And it hurts to watch, but it's also just amazing. And again, simplicity in that, because you're right. This wasn't in the phase that we're in now, which is what's the most creative way I can kill people. This is, how would a soldier kill someone? And that's what they would do in this situation. But man, he buries that knife in there and just pulls. And then she drops down into the water and you get that great underwater shot where you can just see the gash in her neck. And you can fully appreciate how grotesque those special effects are and how good that moment is. But also just the violence that leads up to the death there. She goes to come out of the pool. He doesn't just stab her in the face. He kicks her in the face.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to mention that scene starts with the brutality of a kick to the face.
Yes. And so again, then as you put the puzzle together of this being a guy who was slighted by a woman, then that that anger and the fact that he's taking out all of his latent feelings about Rosemary on just whatever co-ed happens to be in his way, that comes through so much more with putting a combat boot to a woman's face than just slitting her throat just quickly. Then that shows that there is a game element to it, because he could have just been standing there and stabbed her and been done with it. But there's an aggression. There's a mental violence to that, because that scene that, we've all, at this point in 2023, how many people have we seen killed in pools in these movies? Tons.
Yeah.
But that scene is so guttural because of opening with that boot to her face.
Yeah.
And then he gets down in the pool with her and he makes the whole thing very personal. That's the other thing about the kills in this movie. When we did The Town That Dreaded Sundown, he worked on becoming more efficient to the point that by the end of that movie, he was shooting people. In this, he makes every kill an up-close personal thing. And it really shows the fact that this is something that he needs to do because he's taking out some deep-rooted issues with these kills. So the pool one, I absolutely loved. And the other one, the one like jump scare in this movie that really got me was a kill that we don't actually see, which is when we see what we kind of are led to believe is Rosemary's body kind of drop down out of the chimney.
Yeah.
And so then while we don't actually see that kill, one, great special effects on that corpse. Looked fantastic. Mm-hmm. But two, you see the level of decay that's evident there. And you go back to, well, that's probably not 35 years of decay. So how often has he been killing people for 35 years?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you end up with all these great ones. Like I said, when I was talking about the killer, I love that when he gets the couple with the pitchfork at the beginning, that again, boot on the back of it, push, not going to stop until they're both dead. So yeah, the violence in this movie, it's gratuitous, but it leads to the fact that this has that gritty grindhouse feel. This isn't supposed to be anything spectacular. You're supposed to have a guttural reaction to some of these things. And as far as boobs go, the ones we got were great. Like, I can't be mad at it, right? Like, they fit right in with a great kill. So I don't want to step all over all of them because I want you to be able to talk about some of them too. But I do think that the nudity is not gratuitous in this. There's just enough of it to pique your interest. But yeah, I think the violence is realistic, gratuitous. I mean, on the verge of gross sometimes, but not crossing that line into being really gory. It's gratuitous in the fact that it feels real.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Addressing the sex in the movie, we really only get one scene of nudity. And it makes perfect sense. She's showering.
Right, because she's getting ready for a dance.
As gratuitous as the shot was, it doesn't linger. So to me, it doesn't seem voyeuristic. It seems almost natural. I wouldn't call it tasteful, but I would call it natural. It's not
art house nudity.
Yeah, it's not art. It's definitely not art. But it is welcomed.
Right.
I ain't mad about it, but it makes sense for the narrative because it would have been weird if she's showering and then you don't see her naked.
Right.
Like,
plus,
if because then they would have gone out of the way to cover her up.
Right. Plus, shower boobs, trope, check. You
got shower boobs.
You got shower boobs.
So it's there. You do get, she happens to be wearing a white lingerie when she goes swimming in the pool.
Right.
So you get your 80s bush shot, but it's through the it's through her panties, So again, it was to me, that felt like a very natural and normal thing to happen.
Right.
You know, she's telling him, hey, let's go swimming in the pool, you know, and she is specifically waiting to take it off for when he gets there,
Yeah.
you know, because that's the reveal. It's like, you know, this is what you came for. Let me show you, you know,
Right.
you're not giving them away too much right at the beginning, you know? So it felt normal, natural to me. The amount of sex and nudity there. The violence, you're right. But here's the thing. The violence is gratuitous only because it does the exact opposite of what the camera does for the sex, in that it does linger and it does feel voyeuristic. And the thing is that it all, again, feels natural. There's nothing comic book about it.
Right.
There's nothing like Dawn of the Dead, which is Savini's first major work, feels like a comic book. It's so over the top. The blood is so ruby red. It's very clearly a comic book. It's very clearly over the top. I think that his finest work is in Day of the Dead. Those special effects are just spectacular. They're outstanding. They're perfect. But there's an element of supernatural there, because I have to believe that the zombie is doing this to you.
Right.
Whereas here, it's a crazy dude with a bayonet, or it's a crazy dude with a pitchfork, or it's a crazy dude with a shotgun. You know, to me, the everydayness of these kills, the very normal and mundane aspect of these kills, is what makes it so difficult to watch.
Yeah.
And there isn't this giant gush of blood that happens. It's just the right amount.
Yes.
It's the real world amount. And I wonder sometimes if Savini drove around Pittsburgh looking for people who were willing to get paid to be murdered.
Yeah.
So that he could study what it looks like when you slice someone's neck open. How much blood is it? And then he would just, he would do the slicing himself, and he'd sit there with paper and pencil. Okay, and it gushes here.
And a stopwatch.
Here.
Like,
okay.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Thank you very much. Here's your payout. And then the person would fall over. That's kind of how I imagine. Like, how does someone get this good at knowing what death looks like?
And it's so crazy. Like, the thing that always pops up with Tom Savini special effects is the fact that it's not done where there's a cut to one body part that's obviously just, a fake. Mm-hmm. When, like I said, when you see the girl's neck get slashed, you see her head's right there, and it looks like that's her neck. Mm-hmm. When the girl gets stabbed with the pitchfork in the shower, I mean, we get like a full body shot. Mm-hmm. Where obviously, like, everything above the pitchfork is her. Yeah. And it's just moving and writhing. Yes. And it looks like they're just sinking a pitchfork into this woman. And it's amazing. And we'll always, always, always go back to about 42 years later. We're still watching this, wondering if he actually stabbed some chick with the pitchfork in the shower. And the thing is that he uses, they're all low tech when you really stop and think about it. They're just inventive in how he pulls these things off. So there's behind the scenes stuff that you can find on YouTube. Tom Savini had like a video diary that he made while he was doing this. So like, you don't actually see the thing, but if I know anything about special effects, looks like he actually fitted like a fake sleeve onto her neck, right? That had the machete already attached to the sleeve, so that when he's pulling like this, you actually see the skin, fake skin, the sleeve that's on her pulling. Okay. Very, very low tech, but
really, really effective. And
Yeah.
he knows exactly where you need to place the camera for, for the effect to be sold. He knows exactly how much blood to put on there, exactly how much makeup to put on. It's just knowing your craft. For me, the one that is maybe the one that gets me the most is, I love the pull kill, but Miss Allison, when she gets stabbed through the neck,
Yeah.
there's a brutality about that to me, just like, I don't know, like he was really letting frustration out there.
Yeah.
That was a healing moment for him, and
Just it's like I know it is. Like I get it,
yeah,
but it's just it's such a hilarious thing to say out loud.
it is a hilarious thing to say out loud, but that's the way these fucking people think.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yes, you've just healed a part of me from that Dear John letter. Thank you for your service. It's the same shit everyone tells the soldiers when they come back, right? Thank you for your service. And then they
Right.
don't fucking do anything. It's just a thank you, right? So she's helping him work through his trauma, and he's thanked her for her service. But it's the way that he fucking stabs into her. And it's insane, and sometimes it's just as simple as the pitchfork has, little parts of it cut out. So you
Right.
see, the two outer forks go around her torso, and then the two forks that are in there are just, cut short, and they just press it up against her. And that's
Right.
it. It's kind of how they did the machete scene in Day of the Dead. The machete has
Yeah.
a cutout, and then they started with the machete already on the guy's face and then filmed it coming off,
Right.
and then just played it backwards.
Yeah.
Simple little things like that. And to Savini, just he to me, there's two special effects guys that pushed the craft to the edge. One is Ray Harryhausen. Very different kind of special effects, but if you're into horror and you're into monsters, you got to check his stuff out. I mean, the guy is an absolute legend.
Yes.
There is no one better than Ray Harryhausen for what Ray Harryhausen did. And then there's Tom Savini.
Yeah.
And then there's everyone else. There's other names that that you should know. You got to know your Carlo Rambaldis. You got to know your Greg Nicoteros.
Yeah.
And Nicotero's a guy who studied under Savini.
Yep. Went to Savini School of Special Effects.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of Savini special effects, I mean, we'd be remiss if we did not mention the fact that the killer ends up meeting his end because they blow his head off with a shotgun. What's really fascinating about this to me is when you talk about exploding heads, the movie that people tend to go to is Scanners.
Yeah.
Scanners came out the same year as this. Scanners was also 1981. So I went and checked because, like I said, as soon as I saw his head explode, I was like, "Oh, it's like Scanners." Wait, what year did Scanners come out? And then I went and looked. These movies came out in the same year.
Yeah.
So that was just like the special effect of 81 was like, can we blow somebody's head up and make it look realistic?
Who did the exploding head in Scanners? Well, who did the special effects in Scanners?
I don't know. I know it was a Cronenberg. I don't know who did the special effects. But I mean, so that's Tom Savini's catalog is full of exploding heads. But yeah, so it was just like I said, that was when I first saw it. I immediately made the Scanners reference, and then like I said, went and looked, and Scanners was also released in 81. So it was quite the summer to have a head in 1981. But I mean, it's one of those things where they do such a good job of cutting to it at the moment of explosion that, if you were to watch it frame by frame, it's 100% obvious that it's just, a model head that they blew up. But they do such a good job of cutting to it at the moment of explosion that your focus isn't on that section of face that's laying there to the side that's obviously fake. You're just enjoying the fact that you watched a person's head explode.
Right. And he had perfected it already. This was the third time he had done the exploding head gag. The first time was in Dawn of the Dead. It's the very first kill of the movie.
Yes.
You know, the police storm that apartment complex. They kick open the door. There's a zombie. It turns around. Boom.
Yeah.
Fucking shotgun shell right to the fucking face. And then it happens again in a movie that I don't really know how I feel about the movie because it's kind of strange, but the kill effects are fantastic. And, you know, it's Savini. Movie called Maniac.
Oh, yeah. I always forget that Maniac is a Savini movie. Oh,
Yeah.
I
I think
don't know how I feel about it, but great kills is the best way to sum up Maniac.
Yeah. Maybe we need to watch it and do it on here so that I can finally, you know, sort out my thoughts on that movie. Because there's definitely some really good stuff in it, but there's also stuff that I don't know how to feel about.
Yes.
So, it happens again there that he just walks up to this car and bang right through the windshield, and the guy actually happens to be Savini, the actor who gets his head blown off, because it was Savini's head. He actually had a leftover head from Dawn of the Dead, and it was his head that had been cast. So he actually made a new cast in this one using the actor's face, not his own face. And he was like, okay, well, I know exactly how to do this thing. I've done it before, you know. It's to me, if you want an exploding head, and Scanners was not him, but it is really interesting that there are two movies where you know the exploding head plays such a pivotal role in the movie. But yeah, what a way to meet your demise.
Right. And again, and what's really interesting about that is that idea that, you know, in this day and age, it's always about, can I build my franchise? Mm-hmm. For this movie, it was, can I tell a story and have a cathartic ending for the audience? And so it was like, yeah, no, fuck it, we'll blow the killer's head up. Like, what do we care? Like, the movie's made, like, it's done. His story's told. Right. We can move forward now. But, you know, we've already storyboarded at least 2 sequels. So
at least 2. One of them will be good.
Yeah. Yeah. Then we'll let the third one fall off, but we'll have made our money by then. So, I mean, it's about that time, right? We've talked to kills, we've talked to boobs, we've talked to killer. So it's time to rate the movie. So we like to remind you, as we always do, that when we rate a movie on Shiver, we only rate it against itself. So while we've drawn parallels to plenty of other movies, we're not comparing this to Halloween, to Friday the 13th, anything else like that. We are just looking at the movie, The Prowler, and how it was presented to us. And there is a scene in this where we get a great feat of strength from just a completely normal character. And that is somehow Pam manages to snap his iconic pitchfork right at the handle with her bare hands. So keeping that in mind, out of a possible 5 broken pitchforks, Dave, what do you give Maniac? Or not Maniac, what do you give The Prowler?
And you said feat of strength, and I was thinking of that line from Robin Hood Men in Tights. You know, au contraire, what we need is great strength of feet. Fuck, I was hoping that I would be able to come up with it while I talked about that Robin Hood reference. Okay. Here's the thing. I can't think of why I shouldn't give it 5.
Okay.
And the thing is, I know it's not perfect. I know that I am talking about this movie with rose-colored glasses. I'm watching it with rose-tinted glasses. And I don't fucking care. I love this movie. And when someone asks me, hey, I want to watch a slasher, what are slashers all about? This is always the first one I mention.
Yeah, always. It's going to be high on that list for me now, too.
It always is. For me, this is a perfect slasher. There's not a single thing that I would change. That's not true. I would have that weird side story where they go down into the basement to bone, and then we never see them bone, and then nothing ever happens. I would just take that one thing out.
Right.
If there were a Shiver cut of this movie, it would be exactly the same thing, but that's taken out.
But just never see him go in the basement.
But here's the thing. That's when I go to the kitchen and refill my popcorn.
Fair.
So it's for me, it's perfectly fine. It's not the first movie where I have to ignore one scene, and it's not going to be the last. But I don't fucking care. I love this movie. It's perfect for me, and it's 5. 5 broken pitchforks.
I'm not going to go quite that high because there was a part of this movie that stood out to me that I don't know. I didn't like it all that much. Like, I understand the purpose that it served, but I didn't like at the end. I didn't like how somehow that dude was still alive, or maybe he wasn't, and it was in her imagination. Like,
that's what I thought. I thought that it was like the trauma of the night. She opened it up and, they were dead. They were there, but,
yeah, because, then you immediately see him just hanging back there. And so, while I do respect that. And so, but, now I'm with the question of it's definitely not worth docking it a ton. Mm-hmm. But so, if I were to dock it like a quarter for that and a quarter for the basement storyline not playing out, I'm not going to quite go 5, but I did enjoy the hell out of this. It is definitely going to rank up there in movies that this is going to be one where when I find somebody who mentions a couple of the big name slashers that they know and that they like a lot, this is going to be one that I'm going to go to where I'm going to be like, well, have you seen The Prowler? Because this is a great one that laid the groundwork for so many of those things that you're talking about. So I'm not quite on the 5 bandwagon, but I'm going to go 4.5 broken pitchforks on this one because I enjoyed the hell out of it. There's a lot of really great stuff here, and just the kills are spectacular. Just absolutely amazing kills. Just enough story, the fun of putting the mystery together to yourself. The very odd opening that laid the groundwork for the movie to play out so well. Just so many good things to talk about here. I'm just not quite ready to give it a 5. Year from now, I may have gone back and I may be over whatever that little bit keeping me away from 5 is if I were to redux this in some time. But
time heals all wounds.
But so yes, I'm going to go 4.5 broken pitchforks on this.
There you go. 4.5 and a 5. We average that out. That's 4 3/4. But we don't fraction here.
We don't.
Or decimal, because that's what that was. It was 4.75. But I did say 3/4, and that was a fraction. I'm mathing too hard right now.
See, this is why we don't.
I'm spiraling. Yeah. So that rounds up, if I remember from my arithmetic, and so it's going to be 5 broken pitchforks for the very first installment of our summer slasher series, The Prowler. Perfect 5 out of 5 broken pitchforks.
And I mean, the summer's the slasher is the perfect summer movie.
It really is.
Just that's why so many of them take place at summer camps. Mm-hmm. That's why when you're watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that Texas heat is oppressive because they're the perfect summer movie. So very excited to keep the summer slasher series going. We're going to keep it going for a few more weeks, and I'm going to call an audible on you here, Dave.
Okay.
Because after talking about this for this 90 minutes, I want to stay in the 80s, and there's been one I've been kicking around doing next week. So if you have it, because I haven't had a chance to check, but it seems like one you would have in your share so that we can watch it. Do you have Slumber Party Massacre? Could we do that next week?
Of course I have Slumber
Party. Of course you have Slumber Party Massacre. So tune in next week as we will be doing, we're going to stick around in the 80s. Slumber Party Massacres, 82, 83.
I think it's 83, yeah.
So we're going to stay early 80s. And next week, we're going to go to the other side of the storytelling coin. Mm-hmm. And we're going to do Slumber Party Massacre to keep this summer slasher series going.
Oh, I'm so excited about this. Oh, man, I'm really excited. Oh, fuck. This is fantastic.
So if you were watching live, we appreciate it so much. Always feel free to comment. Let us know that you're out there watching. If you're listening, know that we always record Wednesdays at 9/8 Central. You can catch us live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We are on all of the social media at ShiverPod. You can always head to shiverpod.com where you'll find links to all of our social media outlets, Instagram being the one where we are the most active. And we keep managing to pick up people, meet new folks. So reach out to us if you've got an idea. Like Dave said, the idea for Summer Slasher Series came to us. We're from a fan, from a friend of the show, really, not just a fan. I mean, been on the show. And reach out to us. Let us know. Also, keep in mind, once we get past Summer Slasher, we are looking at the possibility of bringing back Summer Fan Fest. So
Yep.
if you've got a movie that we have not done yet that you want to be on the episode to talk with us about, reach out to us, hit us a DM, tag us on Twitter, something. Let us know what movie we should be doing. We'd love to have you on and talk about it.
Absolutely. So on behalf of all of us here at Shiver, fright you very much.